Yes, Dragon's Dogma is worthy of obsessing over. I know I wait until the end of the video for that conclusion usually, but right up front, the answer is yes. So I guess today's question that we're really asking is Dragon's Dogma for you? With that being said, hey, I'm Ray, and this is Obsession. Today, we're looking at Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen. Before we dive into Dragon's Dogma, a quick overview of what it means to be obsession-worthy. An obsession-worthy game is a game that can be played for hundreds of hours over dozens of playthroughs, often back-to-back. To determine this, I look at if a game can provide fun and unique mechanics, meaningful build variety, unique playthroughs, and ease of replay. On to the discussion. Dragon's Dogma was originally released by Capcom back in 2012. It sold decently well and was received well. However, it never really caught the mainstream limelight like other franchises did, solidifying itself as more of a cult classic rather than a cultural cornerstone. I actually found this game back in 2019, right before going into the pandemic. I watched a Monster Hunter creator at the time who suggested it, and I figured I'd give it a try. And I was so happy that I did because it quickly became one of my all-time favorite games. And while I and so many others love Dragon's Dogma, I have to say I understand why it didn't explode into popularity like something like Skyrim did. On the surface, Dragon's Dogma is an action RPG set in what comes off as a pretty generic fantasy world, with relatively generic-looking dragon. The dialogue is campy and is best known for its constant voice lines such as, "Wolves hunt in packs," and "Their kind ill likes ice and fire." This dialogue has come to be loved by fans, but can easily be off-putting to new players. The world of Granzis is moderately sized at best and forces the player to slowly walk across the map just about any time they want to go somewhere. The story told through the main story quest is bare bones and leaves a lot of questions unanswered. Not to mention, due to how the game is set up, some players may not even come across important questions that are left unanswered. This last point sounds odd, but that's kind of the point. Dragon's Dogma is sort of an odd game. And frankly, I think that's what makes it so memorable and so addicting. Now that I've laid out the oddness of the game, let's talk about how the game plays. I'll keep this somewhat surface level since the concepts will fill into future sections of the video. Dragon's Dogma is an open-world, action, party-based RPG. There is a main questline that follows you, the Arisen, on a journey to reclaim your heart from the dragon who stole it while attacking your town. In addition to the main questline, there are numerous side quests, ranging from helping specific characters through their own personal journeys to fulfilling quest board objectives such as killing a certain amount of specific enemy or escorting an NPC safely to a location. Arguably the best selling point of what could otherwise have been a very generic RPG is the freedom that it gives the player within the systems of the game. Everything from combat to quest design, there never seems to be one answer of how things can play out, and that's where the beauty of Dragon's Dogma really shines. Exactly how that freedom is implemented will be touched on in the coming section. As seems to be my usual MO, I want to start off by talking about Dragon's Dogma combat and what makes it unique. Starting off simple, a majority of classes known as vocations, more on that in builds, have two weapons that they can equip at a time. Fighters can equip a sword and a shield, striders can equip daggers and bows, mages only get staves, but however, they get twice as many skills for those staves. Again, more on that in builds. Primary weapons tend to have two attacks, light and heavy, and can often be used. While every weapon has basic attacks, all weapons, well, more specifically vocations, allow the player to equip 3 usable skills for each weapon, and 6 skills for solo weapon classes. For instance, a ranger can equip 3 skills for their longbow, such as the ability to shoot multiple arrows at once, the ability to zoom in and make precise shots, and the ability to do a heavy pull that, if timed correctly, deals a heavy amount of damage. Likewise, you can also equip 3 skills to your daggers, such as the ability to quick dash around the field while slashing, the ability to toss an enemy into the air and set off an explosive powder, and the ability to unleash a flurry of blows both on the ground and while grappling. And this is where Dragon's Dogma really sets itself apart from other action games. Throughout the game, you will fight small enemies such as bandits and goblins, but Often you'll come across large monsters, such as cyclopses, ogres, griffins, hydras, drakes, among others. While you can stay on the ground and fight a monster, you can also scale these monsters. To do so, you grapple onto the monster and start crawling to reach specific weak points you're aiming for. Even cooler, this system can also encourage a monster to act in certain ways. For instance, it may not seem surprising, but a Cyclops' eye is its weak point. But some Cyclopses actually wear helmets to protect their eyes. If the player climbs on a Cyclops' back and attacks it, the Cyclops will try to grab the player off, knocking its own helmet off. This exposes the weak point and makes the fight much easier. There are so many cool interactions like this throughout the game, but I don't want to go over many of them since this is really what makes the game so much fun on a blind playthrough is figuring out how to fight these monsters. As a matter of fact, much of what I will cover will only be surface level because there's so much that I don't want to spoil for anyone that hasn't played Dragon's Dogma. While I know many people look up guides to play this game, I want to say right now, do yourself a service and play through this story completely blind for the first new game cycle. There are some incredible moments that shouldn't be spoiled. Also, there's a lot you can miss in this game, which is actually a really big draw for replays. I'll probably mention this again, but you really don't get the full story of Dragon's Dogma until you play through a second time on New Game Plus. So, again, do yourself a service, play through this blind. Maybe on New Game Plus you can look up a guide and see all the things that you missed. Small tangent over, but I want to continue to talk about the combat. Whenever you defeat a creature, they have a chance of dropping some loot. Much of this loot can be taken back to a blacksmith to upgrade your equipment, sort of Monster Hunter style. What's more, if you defeat a dragon, whether it's the dragon of the main story or one of the minor drakes that you come across throughout the game, there's a chance that a piece of equipment will be upgraded past its limits and take on the status of something called Dragon Forged. Even this can be further upgraded once you get into the DLC, Bitter Black Isle. And this isn't necessarily a unique mechanic, as much as more a unique design quality, but Dragon's Dogma's world is punishing and cruel, and lets you become super overpowered if you want. The world of Dragon's Dogma does not scale with the player. A wolf is a wolf, no matter where you fight it. There are reasonably easy, even early on, and a joke much later on. There are tiers of monsters, such as wolves having dire wolves and later on hellhounds as an upgrade to them. However, these stronger variants depend on where you are in the game, not how far you are, but literally where you are in the world. Early on, there's a path that leads into a large group of bandits. Bandits, as with most humanoid enemies in this game, are quite challenging. When you come across this group, you can bash your head against the wall until you eventually beat them and get by, or you can do what the game is trying to get you to do, which is walk away and return later when you have better equipment and skills. The game, in many ways, respects your intelligence and expects you to think through whether this is what you should be doing right now, or if your approach is truly the best option in dealing with this problem. However, as mentioned, Dragon's Dogma allows you to get overpowered as early as you want. Since this was not my first playthrough, I was actually able to outsmart the system, and within the first hour or so of the game, own endgame DLC equipment and literally killing death, bringing me to a higher level than most people end the game at. There's also an arrow in this game that literally kills anything that it hits. It doesn't matter if you shoot it at a goblin or if you shoot it at the final boss of the game. If it makes contact, the enemy dies, and that's just a feature of the game. I think that this is so cool. If you play this game on hard mode and just play the game as intended, it's got almost Dark Souls level difficulty. However, even if you play on hard mode and you know what you're doing, the game becomes just a playground for you to mess around with. And I think that's really where this game shines. I've had so much fun, especially endgame and postgame, just killing monsters in new ways. It's so much fun just to mess around with these systems that this game provides you with. As a matter of fact, there's this really fun quest where you're tasked to aid a hunting party in killing a griffin that has been attacking trading carts throughout Gransis. The game intends you to lure it in and face off against the griffin up on some cliffs. Once you deal a significant amount of damage, you'll track it back to its nest atop a tower. There's a cinematic chase sequence as you're working to open gates while the griffin picks off a hunting party one at a time. There's even a moment where another NPC that asked you to find a magical tome earlier in the game will come to your aid and cast a giant fireball on the griffin. It's a super fun quest and is incredible to experience. However, if you know how to abuse the mechanics of the game, when you lure that griffin in at the start of the mission, you can completely kill it before it has a chance to retreat, completing the quest before all of that excitement. This is just one example of another unique mechanic. The game doesn't care how you complete quests, or even if you find and complete quests at all. There are some fantastic quest lines that follow Kina, your friend from the start of the game, and interacts with the Witch of the Woods. It fills in so much of the lore and makes several scenes at the end of the game actually make sense. Without completing these quests, the player could actually leave themselves finishing the game with more questions than when they got to the end of the game. And the thing is the quests that I was mentioning can totally be missed if you don't pay attention or you don't seek them out quick enough. If you move the main quest a line, Kina will go on and do her own thing, and you will completely miss this set of quests. I think it makes a lot of sense and, frankly, is a lot of fun. I also want to go back to something else I said about the Griffin quest. Back to the NPC who asked for that tome. In Grand Soren, the main city of Granzis, there's a shopkeeper in the Black Cat who offers forgery services. He can perfectly replicate any item you wish for at a cost. Let's say you narrowly defeated Drake, but still need one more scale to upgrade your weapon. You could fight another Drake, or you could just get that scale forged and have it function as that last upgrade material. In fact, you can do this with just about any item in the game, including quest items such as that magical tome. While the forgeries are perfect replicas, they don't reproduce magical effects. So, if you keep the original version of the tome and give it the forged version to the NPC, he won't know the difference, but he will still try to help you against the griffin. He will run out, shout, and nothing will happen. It's a really funny moment in an otherwise epic quest. And this is just one example, and it isn't really that important in the grand scheme of things. However, there are so many awesome uses for this mechanic of forging in different quests throughout the game. I really wish more games had quirky mechanics like this. It was so fun to learn cool uses for forging and to find interesting ways to complete quests. I mentioned that I encourage blind playthroughs of this game, and I want to emphasize that once again here. I don't want to get into too many uses of forgeries because it can spoil some things that would be really fun to discover on your own. There are still a few more mechanics that I want to get into before we move on to builds. First is traveling in the game. In Dragon's Dogma, if you want to get somewhere, you have to walk, and it can take quite some time to do so. You're forced to interact with the world because of this, thinking through how you may want to group tasks together and properly prepare before you head out. There's nothing worse than traveling halfway across the world and then realizing you forgot something, need to go back to town, grab it, and head back to where you were. If this time sink alone wasn't enough, the world actually becomes more dangerous at night. While I mean this in a literal sense, I also mean that navigating becomes more difficult as well. Dragon's Dogma cares about light and light sources. The game gives you a lantern early on and wants you to use it. Whether you find yourself walking around at night or just happen to be in a cave, you'll need a light source to see where you're going or what may be attacking you. The lantern is worn on the hip and actually interacts with the world. If you wade through waist-deep water, the water will extinguish the lantern, forcing you to unequip, dry it, and re-equip the light again. However, you don't literally have to dry it, just unequipping and equipping it back will be enough. I've mentioned in previous videos that I really like when games make you think about light sources. I don't know why, but it's just really fun for me. I don't know if it's necessarily the immersive aspect or just the fact that it shows that they put care into the game. Going back to that idea of waist-high water extinguishing your lantern, that actually leads into another really cool aspect of the game, and honestly the thing that made me fall in love with this game so quickly and so hard. The fact that character creation isn't just cosmetic, but actually affects your character. Your height and weight plays an active role in how your character develops. Taller characters can wade through deeper waters, can jump up and reach higher ledges. Shorter characters can fit into different areas that a tall character otherwise couldn't. There's a quest later on in the game where you have to fight a bunch of goblins in their base. They crawl through tunnels and kind of come up and attack you in waves. But if you're short enough, you can fit into that tunnel and go and attack the goblins head on and get some extra loot. Likewise, your weight also has an effect on your character. Enemies like harpies like to pick you up, fly you up into the air, and drop you to try to kill you. Heavier characters, though, are harder to lift. It makes the harpies fly in a more janky pattern and a lot slower to get you off the ground, while lighter characters are much easier to lift up. Your weight also affects things such as how much equipment you can equip. If you are a heavier character, you can take more with you. If you're a lighter character, though, you are less encumbered and your stamina regenerates faster, despite heavier characters having more stamina to start with. It's this cool kind of back and forth. Your height can also affect things like your walking speed, with taller characters having just a faster walking pace. That being said, proportionately, shorter characters are actually better sprinters. Beyond just your height and weight, your gender also plays a role. There's a group of female bandits later into the game that hate men. If your character is male, you will be attacked on sight by their leader, while female characters will be welcomed in. There's more to this, but I'll leave it at that. And all of this is so cool to me. I love games that have deep character customization systems. However, I don't care as much about aesthetics, since generally speaking, in most games, you eventually just get armor and helmets that hide your character anyway. But linking your different stats to your height and your weight and your gender is a really cool way to make that character customization matter throughout the game. I also want to say that while there are a lot of examples where this does affect your character, in the grand scheme of things, they're pretty small effects. So at the end of the day, just make whatever character you want to play as. It doesn't matter if they're male, female, short, tall, heavy, light. Just have fun and make whoever you want. That was a bit of a tangent, but like I said, it's just absolutely one of my favorite aspects of the game. But I want to go back to traveling. While the game does make you walk everywhere at first, there is actually a fast travel mechanic in the game, but it's a little different compared to most games. The player comes across a set of items called port crystals and fairy stones. If a player owns a port crystal, they can place it anywhere in the world as long as they are outside. And what this does is it sets up a sort of waypoint. Then, if your player uses a fairy stone, which is a consumable item, they can teleport to any place where a port crystal is in the world, as well as each of the two prominent cities having permanent port crystals. I think this is a really cool version of fast travel that makes the player think about if it's truly worth utilizing something that's consumable, or if it's better just to walk where you need and save the ability to fast travel later. I will mention, though, that because most people are going to play the Dark Arisen version, it includes all DLC, and you are given what is called an Eternal Fairy Stone, which allows you to use limitless fast travel. You can use this if you want, store it away, your call, there's no right answer. But there's one last mechanic that I want to cover, and that's probably one of the most unique and most well-known systems in the game, and that's the pawn system. As the Arisen, you have the ability to command otherworldly beings known as pawns. They can be summoned to you through rift stones, as well as found wandering throughout the world. You are given a main pawn that you can customize to your heart's content, as well as the ability to recruit 2 more pawns to fill in your party how you see fit. With the exception of hybrid vocations, pawns function pretty much identical to player characters in terms of customization, both in class, skills, as well as those aspects of height and weight that I mentioned earlier. While Dragon's Dogma is a single-player experience, pawns add in a sort of pseudo-multiplayer aspect to the game. When playing online, the pawns available at the Riftstone are actually other players' main pawns, and your main pawn will be available to other players. When a player's pawn is summoned into your world, they bring the knowledge from that player's playthrough as well. They can give you hints as to where to go to complete quests, as well as share strategies on how to defeat difficult enemies. And I think that this is really an awesome thing that, again, no other game that I know of, or at least no other game series, has really done anything similar to this concept. And I really wish they would. But I think that talking about pawns leads perfectly into meaningful build variety. Starting off this section, I want to talk about the vocation system. At the start of the game, the player has access to 3 basic vocations: fighter, strider, and mage, that fit your strength, dex, and caster archetypes. Later, by the time you make it to Grand Sorin, you can reclass into 3 advanced vocations, which are more specialized version of the basic vocations. Not necessarily better, but more specialized, as well as 3 hybrid vocations, which combine aspects of 2 basic classes. For the advanced classes, you have Warrior instead of Fighter, which focuses more on all-out offense rather than tactical defense. You have Ranger instead of Strider, which trades speed and mobility for long-range damage. And you have Archmage instead of Mage. They drop the support focus of the Mage for incredibly powerful and flashy offensive spells. As for hybrid classes, there's Mystic Knight, which combines magic and melee with their magic shield, allowing for a parry-based gameplay, as well as the creation of Magic Turret, which is just really fun and really cool. There's also Magic Archer, which focuses on using a magical bow that allows for homing, explosive, and even ricochet shots. And finally, you have Assassin, which goes all in on physical damage, and even encourages the player to play without pawns and to traverse at night, making full use of the class's augments. As you play with any vocation, you will earn both experience for you to level up with, as well as discipline points. These are a secondary type of experience that lets you unlock skills for your vocation, as well as unlock new vocations. In addition to your active skills, classes also have core skills, which don't require stamina to use and often augment your basic combat capability and even your traversal, with mages being able to levitate and striders being able to double jump. Lastly, you can use your discipline points to unlock augments for your vocation. These augments can be slotted onto your character to boost various aspects of the character, from increasing damage, getting better shot prices, to even having a brighter lantern. This is really where the meaningfulness of the build variety comes in. You can use any augment from any vocation on another vocation once you've unlocked it. Even after more playthroughs than I even remember how many I've done, this is really what keeps you coming back, is experimenting with different augment combinations, seeing just how powerful you can get to fight endgame monsters, and getting a build to the exact spot that you want it to. On the other end of discipline points, you have experience. Once you reach a threshold, you level up and increase your stats. That's pretty obvious. However, something interesting that Dragon's Dogma does is that your stats increase according to which vocation you have equipped at the time of level up. Being a fighter when you level up will increase your physical and defensive stats as well as your HP, more than leveling up as a mage, who would increase your magic-related stats and stamina, allowing for more skill usage. This system allows for some fun min-maxing for players who really get into the number sides of builds. However, I will say that even on hard difficulty, you can pretty much ignore this part of the game and be completely fine. It's another instance of the game giving you a mechanic and allowing you the freedom of choice to interact with it as much or as little as you want. Outside of your class and skills, you have equipment, which is arguably just as important for becoming a powerful force in Granzis, if not more important than your vocations and skills. Most pieces of equipment are tied in some way to an appropriate class, such as bows only being usable by bow-wielding classes, or heavy plate mail armor being used primarily by defensive fighter class. Equipment generally follows a progression system, with early weapons and armor being overshadowed by late-game gear. Though there are some exceptions to this, such as the Strider's starting rusted bow being able to apply really potent status effects when upgraded, making it viable even in the late game. All equipment, and all items for that matter, have weight, which can weigh down your character. As your weight goes up, you become slower, recover stamina slower, but also get affected less by things like strong winds and are more difficult to pick up and fly away with. Everything that we just covered also applies to pawns and pawns that you summon in, except that they can't have hybrid classes because those are specific to the Arisen. And I want to say that hybrid classes are a lot of fun. All classes are fun, but Mystic Knight and Magic Archer stand out in my opinion, especially in the late game areas. But back to pawns. Once you have the Arisen where you want, you can then augment your capabilities by building a team around yourself. There's no right way to build a team. However, I would generally recommend always having at least a mage for healing and some way to deal physical damage. Especially later in the game, creatures may be immune to physical or magical damage, and you need a source of each to beat them. This section may have felt a little bit short, but that's not because there isn't enough build variety in the game, but rather because a lot of the things that affect build variety were covered earlier in unique mechanics. So please don't take this section being short, meaning that there isn't much variety. Dragon's Dogma has more than enough decent variety, but it's the freedom to approach the game's problems that make this variety meaningful. While the overarching story of Dragon's Dogma is somewhat static, all the moving parts within it can be adjusted, rearranged a little, or even completely skipped over. While there may be a way to achieve a perfect playthrough, that isn't the point of Dragon's Dogma. The game is all about cycles, so replays are inherently part of the story. In addition to finding new ways to complete objectives or interesting ways to skip certain parts of the game, you can often notice new things and interact with the game differently depending on your selected vocation at any given point in the game. For instance, with proper knowledge and preparation, as I mentioned earlier, there's an item that can actually be used by a certain class to one-shot any enemy, including the final boss. Again, I'll mention that New Game Plus actually alters how the end of the game plays out. Not to mention that the end of the postgame can play out in multiple ways. All I'll say is when you fight the final boss of the game while up in the fog, I'm not talking about the dragon, you should let yourself lose at least once before you actually beat the game. That's all I'll say. This part of the video is actually hard for me to make, not because there's little that adds to unique playthroughs, but rather I really just don't want to spoil this game. It is fantastic if you can't tell by how much I have been gushing about this game. I'll just say this, while I've played the game easily double digits worth of times, and I've sort of found my preferred route through the game, I still find myself veering off the path for role-playing reasons or even for gameplay reasons that make each playthrough fun and unique. Some non-spoiler examples of ways to make a playthrough unique is challenge runs, and Dragon's Dogma allows for quite a bit of challenge runs for those who enjoy the game. Just a few examples are playing with no pawns, playing with no lantern, playing as a single vocation, not upgrading equipment, going straight to the DLC as a new character, or my favorite challenge run, which is to do the Lost Child playthrough. You make the smallest and lightest character you can, a child, and you don't use any pawns or fast travel, and that's the Lost part. I also want to acknowledge that I haven't touched much on the DLC in this video, and that's because, again, I want you to experience it for yourself. I'll say that the premise of the DLC is the game asking, what if the Arisen actually walked away from their destiny? And just like with the main story, you need to finish the DLC twice in order to get the full story. But for the DLC, you want to finish it twice in the same playthrough on the same new game cycle, not twice on a different new game cycle. I do want to mention that the DLC really ramps up the difficulty of this game. For some, it might actually be a little off-putting how challenging it can be. But for those that fall in love with the combat and mechanics of this game, it is perfect. Also, not sure if this belongs in unique playthroughs or ease of replay, but I did want to make mention that Dragon's Dogma actually has a speedrun mode built into the game. It allows you to restart the game with whatever level you're at, whatever equipment you have, and literally times how long it takes you to beat the game. This honestly could have gone in unique mechanics, but that section was already pretty bulky, so this is where I decided to put it. This is just another example of a mechanic that I kind of wish I could see in more games. That being said, I'm not much of a speedrunner, so I didn't really use this all that much. I did it once just to try it out, but it's there if you like it. So how easy does a game that centers around replays and cycles make it for the player to actually replay through the game? Honestly, this is a little bit of a weak point in the game, in my opinion. If you start a fresh game, there's a tutorial you need to play through that teaches you the ropes and hints at what's to come in the game. It's sort of short, but it still needs to be gotten through. Then, once you do get going, there's a lot of running, as mentioned before. A good thing about this is that port crystals stick around through previous new game cycles, so that makes traversal easier. However, the biggest point of friction when it comes to replaying comes from the design of certain quests. Very minor early game spoilers. You face off against a Hydra and cut off one of its head. You're then tasked to escort a cart carrying it back to the capital to announce your deeds, and that you are the Arisen. The issue is that this cart is slow, and you have to stick around it for it to move. If you try to run ahead, the cart will stop moving and wait for you to come back. You can technically kick the ox to speed the cart up, but doing so only gives a short burst of speed and it actually hurts the ox. And if the ox dies, and it will, you have to do it all over again. This section typically takes around maybe 10 to 15 minutes per playthrough. And what's worse, it isn't really even difficult, which just makes it boring. There are other areas in the game that have friction like this as well. There are certain optional quests that give very important and useful items, but you have to escort a pampered little child who is quite obnoxious. Making her upset will actually prevent you from getting the quest reward. But other than these and a couple other instances, the game does an okay job at replayability. Unfortunately, these few instances do really stand out quite a bit. All that being said, as I already mentioned, I have replayed Dragon's Dogma double digits worth of times. So while these do create friction, I think the rest of the game carries its weight enough to make up for this, as long as you actually like it. As always, before we get to answering is Dragon's Dogma obsession worthy, I like to answer, is it fun? But honestly, I've already said yes, it's obsession worthy, and I think I've already implied that it is a ton of fun. So rather than drag this out, let's move on. So is Dragon's Dogma obsession worthy? Yes. But who is Dragon's Dogma obsession worthy for? I think if you're someone who likes somewhat janky games with deep mechanics, fun and interesting combat, character creation that actually impacts gameplay, and dark fantasy worlds inspired by the Berserk manga with their own interesting lore added in, then Dragon's Dogma is for you. If you are somebody who likes polished games with modern quality of life features, in-depth cinematic narrative, Dragon's Dogma may actually not be your next obsession. I would say, even for its time, Dragon's Dogma felt dated in some ways. However, as I mentioned from the start, just as with the campy dialogue, its datedness and jank are actually part of the charm that makes this game so odd and so enrapturing. So there you have it, my thoughts on Dragon's Dogma Dark Arisen. This is a weird one to put into writing, if I'll be honest. I think it's obvious that I love this game. Honestly, I know I claim Dark Souls 2 is my favorite game, but Dragon's Dogma is a very close second. I actually believe that if I found this game back when it came out rather than in 2019, and I already had my established love for Dark Souls 2, Dragon's Dogma probably would be my favorite game of all time. But regardless, despite my love for the game, the fact that so many others like it, it has a lot of flaws to it. When I was capturing footage and thinking about the script, some of these flaws glared more obviously than before. But despite that, I still love the game. And I wanted to communicate and highlight those flaws while also expressing why it's such a loved game. Hopefully I struck that balance well and got across that this is a great game that appeals to a very certain person, and it can be rough to anyone else. But regardless, hopefully I'll see you again soon, and until then, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope that you know that you truly matter in this world. Take care.